Welcome back to another episode of Lost in the Farmer's Market Garden Shorts. Now, this starts off a small series that basically covers a group of cold season biennials, annuals, and quote-unquote perennials, and I use the term perennial loosely. And today's episode features all of these plants in front of you. Now, some of y'all are looking at this going, oh my god, WTF. Why did he pick all these different plants? These plants, every single one of these falls under one category. Kale. Each and every one of these plants is a kale. These are differing forms of the same species, which makes it very interesting. Now, let me start off by telling you that the scientific name for kale is Brassica oleracea variety sebellica. First off, oleracea means herbal vegetable in Latin, give or take. Now, interestingly, Brassica may be from Proto-Celtic, Brassic or Brasilch. I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sure. But basically it means cabbage. So the Brassica family is commonly known as the cabbage family for good reason. There are an astounding number of things in the cabbage family, things you didn't even think were in there, and we're going to dive right into the deep end, kids. And kale is in the cabbage family, so it's related to those big, lumpy, round heads of deliciousness that you see at the supermarket just sitting there looking like they're gonna say, "Feed me, Seymour." But that's beside the point. What's interesting is that kale originates in the Eastern Mediterranean, if not Asia Minor. Now, I'm not precisely sure what they mean by Asia Minor, but it gives you an idea of who developed this wonderful, as they call it now, superfood. We know for a fact that it was cultivated as early as 2000 BCE. That's before Common Era, for those of you who don't know the shorthand. We don't use BC anymore, simply because history goes beyond religion, and therefore before Christ, BC, is old hat. It's not okay anymore. But I'm not going to delve into the politics of that. The reality is that science is its own thing, and history is science. Now, kale is a biennial. It grows from it's a biennial in zones 8 through 10. It's an annual from zone 7 plus and lower. What's interesting is in our zone 8A, which is where the lab and the test gardens and this wonderful series is shot, kale will go get planted in the fall. One of these lovelies like this one or that one or this one or all of them. And they'll go through late summer, fall, winter, spring, into next summer. In fact, I have some dinosaur kale out in the yard that was planted last fall, and it's made it to an entirely separate fall. Right now it doesn't look great because the cabbage moths, which are our perpetual nemesis, have chewed it to death, but it's still there. In fact, it's the plant equivalent of, I'm not dead yet, I got better, but what you gonna do? Cabbage moth's gonna cabbage moth. I'd rather them eat the ones that I'm not planning for supper than to eat the ones I am planning for supper. Kale prefers a soil pH of 6.0 to 7.5. Not surprising. It prefers an exposure of full sun to partial shade, though the more sun it gets, the leafier and greener and more delicious it is. It can reach a height of 1 to 2 feet, and it has a width of 12 inches to 18 inches, depending on species. Now, we're going to get into that right here for you. Now, I said it depends on species, so we're going to adjust the camera angle just a little bit and zoom in. And let's start with the obvious. So, this variety right here that I'm poking with this stick, since I don't have a really good pointer, is winterbore. It's going to be fluffy and dense. It's not going to get to the larger size of the kale grouping. Winterbore is literally the type you buy at the store. Next to it is Scotch Blue Curled, which is an heirloom version of the same thing. They are both curly. I don't prefer them because the curls hold dirt and bugs and ugh. And so it takes more effort to clean them, and I waste more water doing the cleaning. But I grow them as examples, and they're familiar and comfortable to my customers at the market. Over here is one of my favorite heirlooms. We're just going to rotate the camera a little bit, little rotation. This is sometimes called Ragged Jack, but it's most commonly known as Red Russian. And its claim to fame, and I don't know if you can see it here, is that the leaves are irregularly ragged looking. They have holes and they're unusually shaped, and the holes are normal. And there are little weird leaf protrusions right here. You see that? I'm going to zoom in so you can see close to what I'm talking about. Okay. See this little leaf protrusion? It does that. And it's completely random, and it's an heirloom mutation. It's an old school heirloom. It's called Ragged Jack or Red Russian because of the brightly colored stems. See those red stems there? In the middle is this year's special kale. Now you would think this was collards or some loose leaf cabbage. No sir, that's marrow stem. Marrow stem is also an old school heirloom that is completely edible. It does not produce fibers in the stems, so you don't discard the stems, you can just eat that. Talk about waste not, want not. I mean, that's a plant after my own heart. Anything that you can eat the whole dang thing, except maybe the roots, and even then if you can eat the roots that'd be a bonus, is a win for me. And then on the showy I'm special side of the scale, we have this candidate. This is lace kale. It's highly decorative. The leaves are all over the place, almost like Ragged Jack, aka Red Russian. And it's a lot crunchier than your traditional. Marrow stem's very soft and delicious, so is this. This group here comprises the soft cooking kales. This is a hard cooking kale. It's very crunchy, it's pretty pungent for a kale, and it's really cool to look at, so that even if you don't eat it, it's decorative. How about that? But then in the back, we have something really special this year. I'm zooming in just a little bit, and in fact I'm going to move a kale or two out of the way with my stick of doom. Right here is dinosaur kale, also known as lacinato, also known as Tuscan cabbage, also known as cavallo, also known as black cabbage, also known, I'll stop, it's got a lot of names. This is traditional Tuscan kale. Notice the flat leaves, the nearly flat leaves, the crinkliness, everything about it. Tuscan kale is famous for its ability to retain crunch after cooking. The leaves are straight, nearly flat, and are absolutely delicious. It retains color and crunch regardless of how hard you cook it. I have made cavallo stew with Italian sausage and fennel in the whole 9 yards many, many, many times in my life. It was one of the best things that has ever been introduced to me by a former client back in New Jersey. But this is also cavallo, aka dinosaur kale. I'm going to rotate the camera for close-up. Hey, baby. Bow, bow, bow. As you can see, the leaves are more spooned and curled and darker. What's up with that? That is Black Magic dinosaur kale, a darker, crunchier breed. It still cooks down, but it's got more bite and more color to it. And unfortunately, I don't have any good specimens of the other type that is available here at the Test Gardens. I will probably do that in a Redux video later. Rainbow kale. Rainbow dinosaur kale. A kale with a randomized gene that produces stems that can be anywhere from green, white, red, yellow, purple. Oh, but still my heart. I digress there. The point is, the kales are a very, very diverse group. So, to say that there isn't a kale to suit your fancy is a flat lie. Oops, I just knocked that one over with my stick of doom. Let's zoom out for a bit and get back on the topic. Well, closer to it. Okay. That's the cast of troublemakers here. Now, they say that it is a superfood. Personally, I find this term really dumb, because ultimately it's a natural food that is just nutrient dense. It's been here for forever and a day. As I pointed out, it was cultivated as early as 2000 BCE. Think about that. It's been around for forever. For someone to just roll up and say, oh, like totally, it's a superfood. No, it's just nutritious. We don't need fancy terms to eat well. If you need health, kale is your plant. Now, I'm going to get into the nutrition in a second, but let me just throw some facts at you. Kale was once slang for money because it was so valuable. So, give me the kale and no funny business. The word cole, C-O-L-E, comes from Latin caulis, which is a reference for stem. All cabbage crops are sometimes called cole crops, including kale. It gets better, though. Kale itself prefers added phosphorus and potassium in the soil, but isn't too touchy about the pH. I mean, it can be kind of gross in heavy alkaline soils, but you make it work. Now, what's interesting is that kale does have two biological side effects that I need to discuss. One of them relates directly to nutrition. Eating too much kale can block thyroid function, preventing your thyroid from utilizing iodine correctly. So all those supermodels who are bulking up on kale, they're having a double whammy. If you have a thyroid condition, kale might actually be good for you in a medicinal sense. Just saying. Putting it out there in the street. Yeah. But what's interesting is kale has one other interesting effect, and I'm going to go through the nutrition first and then get to this fact. Per 8 ounces, or 67 grams, kale has 25 milligrams of sodium, 329 milligrams of potassium, 2.9 grams of protein, 133% of your vitamin A uptake for daily values. It has 134% of your vitamin C uptake for daily, 10% of your calcium uptake, 5% of your iron uptake, 10% of your B6 uptake, 7% of your magnesium uptake, and 2.6 grams of fiber. Now, about that fiber. Kale is going to give you gas. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Well, there's a but about it, but you get my point. It's because of the fiber. The dietary fiber scours you out, gives you gas, and you have to go visit the porcelain goddess for a little sit down and chat, if you get my drift. This is good for you, but not in large quantities, because let's face it, you don't want to rip one in church, and you don't want to have all of that stuff come down to the station while you're singing the gospel. That said, kale is good for you. Kale comes in all kinds of shapes and forms and textures, and it will meet your need, guaranteed. You can't go wrong with kale. It's easy to grow too. I mean, basic garden soil is sufficient, though it does benefit from poultry manure like all plants do. It loves, since you're growing a leaf green, nitrogen primarily with extra other stuff is the best way to go. Slow release fertilizers are really good. It loves that Alaska fish fertilizer, which is 511. That's nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And I mean, why the hell not? It's a cold weather crop that you can ignore, just water and ignore, and maybe fertilize a little bit, and then let it grow. In 8A, it'll shrug off everything winter has to throw, unless it's one of those freak super cold winters. Then you do have to, clench really hard. Otherwise, kale is compatible in pots. Every single one of these varieties I've grown successfully in pots as small as 12-inch diameter pots with success. You can expect to pull a harvest per plant of maybe, in the home garden with lackadaisical growing standards, maybe about a half-pound a plant, assuming you harvest the leaves and not the whole head, which is what I always advocate for when you're talking leaf greens. Beyond that, kale is one hell of a staple food, and you should grow it, and you should have it in your garden, and it's October when I film this, and you can plant it in 8A all the way through November and expect something. It may not happen before Christmas, but it will certainly happen in time for New Year's. And that's all I have for you today. So, if you like this episode, like, subscribe, hit up the blog, which is due for an update. This is the first part of a cold seasonal mini-series, some of which will get reduxed. As always, folks, keep them growing, and kale for the win. Thank you for watching.